Welcome to the Headset Podcast. I have an incredible person with me today. I know I keep saying incredible, but the truth of it is I've got someone really special today. Someone who's going to give us a look into sports from a completely different angle, and it's one that is fascinating to me. The person I have with us today is the one and only Lori Okimura. And Lori is someone who's going to talk to us about the business of sport, the passion of sport, the heart of sport, and everything that goes in knowing your sport. And she's a person who's been there, done it in so many different ways in the world of volleyball. And Lori, you're technically now the person in charge as the international technical delegate for the 2020, or I guess Tokyo 2021 Paralympic Games in the world of sitting volleyball. And I'm so excited to talk to you because you bring a wealth of information as also former chairperson, chair of the board with USA Volleyball. There's so much that you've done in this sport. And I'm like, I can't believe I got a chance to speak to you. You have no idea. I've got goosebumps. That's why I'm wearing a long sleeve t-shirt in California, because I'm so excited to talk to you. So Lori, thank you so much for coming on the Headset Podcast. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really eager to learn from some of the other folks you've had on your podcast, and I'm going through the history as we speak. But I'm delighted to be able to share a little bit of what what I've gone through in my career, which has not always been success. Some of it has been failure, of course. I'm really pleased to be in a position to work with some other folks in sitting volleyball to help with the competition in Tokyo, hopefully next year, next summer, and have really enjoyed sort of the ups and downs of being involved in one particular industry on many different sides. As I'll be happy to share a little bit about that experience as well.
So Lori, I got to ask you, volleyball must be a huge part of your life growing up.
It was, in fact, like most kids. I grew up in Hawaii, and in Hawaii, volleyball is a national pastime. it's the sport of the state in most cases. But for me, it was a way to make friends after my family moved to California, to Northern California in particular, which at the time had a really vibrant volleyball community. It was a sport that and some people may cringe when they hear me say this, but it was a sport that a lot of girls were encouraged to play, at a young age, because it was available and it was non-contact and all those things that they tell you when you're young and you don't know any better to question. For me, it was a great opportunity. I loved the interaction with team. Volleyball is definitely a sport you can't play by yourself. Right? You have to have, other people around you. But also, what I've always appreciated about the sport, and also have shared with other people, my perspective about it, is it's a sport that you can play at any age, at any level, in almost every surface you can think of. There's snow volleyball now. There's beach volleyball, which is a huge popular aspect of the sport, and I've played volleyball with a net tied between two coconut trees on the grass, so it's, to me, something that's appealing. And almost everybody I run into, you ask, they hear you work in volleyball, or something about volleyball. Oh, I played on my, high school team, or I played in elementary school, or I played yesterday with a bunch of friends, down at the beach. And, the funny story, one day this was a long time ago, I was working on a project and had the opportunity to step onto the Google campus in Northern California, and was shocked and amazed to find some of the best manicured beach volleyball courts that I've ever seen in a non-beach environment. And when I asked about it, they were telling me that they have internal leagues and tournaments, and people practice on those courts. So that was some validation, I guess, that if the employees at Google could form their own tournament, then possibly our sport was something that appealed to a lot of people, a lot of different people.
I got to say, I don't know the statistics as well as maybe I should know, but I can only talk personally. When I watch the Olympics every year, next to the 100-meter dash, I don't know of anything more exciting than watching volleyball. And I gotta believe that the rating.
The statistics, generally speaking, is that every 4 years when the Summer Olympic Games are held, that beach volleyball in particular, beach volleyball is one of the most watched. It is one of the most popular in terms of it is hard to get a ticket. Tickets are sold out, way in advance. I had somebody offer me a ticket, about $1,000 for a ticket to a preliminary round that was already in progress, because they thought that I might have an extra ticket. I said, no, I only have the ticket that I'm holding that I'm gonna, go in with, and sorry, I can't, I'm not willing to let it go. A large part of that popularity, I think, is because it is different. It is something unique. Visually, beach volleyball in particular is incredibly appealing when it's played against, backgrounds of blue skies and blue oceans and calm sand. So uh, the visual appeal, I think, is one part of it, but also there are some very interesting personalities amongst the athletes who are competing. It's
Oh,
an international, global sport, right? It did start in the United States, but one could argue, that a lot of those other countries that are becoming more and more expert, if you will, in their volleyball prowess. I mean, now you've got teams that are excelling and taking home, not just major tournament victories, but Olympic medals and world championships, who come from Germany, who come from Norway, obviously, come from the traditional beach volleyball countries like Brazil and the United States, but also you've seen winners coming from China, coming from, Italy. I mean, it's a global sport.
well, I'm going to tell you something kind of silly about myself. I was 23 years of age before I ever went to my first beach. As a kid from Toronto, Canada, I'd never been to the beach before. Now we have parts of the city called the beaches, where we have like some sand scattered around a lake, right? But I've never been to a beach before, and a lot of my friends have obviously been on family vacations and this and that, traveled to Europe to see relatives, whatever. I had never been to anywhere in my life, to be quite honest with you, that my sport that I competed in didn't take me to. So if it wasn't for sports, I would have never left my parents' backyard. And I landed this pretty cool job one year where a good friend of mine and I got a chance to tour the United States on the coolest trip ever, and teach hockey school. And basically, the coolest trip that we got brought us to California. We landed in California and we're here for about 3 weeks. And I can tell you, there was like two things I really wanted to experience. Well, three things I wanted to experience. First, obviously, was the beach. Third, third was, doing the rodeo drive and the Hollywood sign, so I could, like, be bougie and show off to all my friends and family back home. But number two, which was a dead for sure, we're gonna do, was to go to the AVP Pro Tour. And
Right.
we went to the one back in the day. It was in Hermosa Beach. And I got to be honest with you. I was scouring this morning to look for this picture that I really wanted to show off to you. And it was a picture that I got 100 years ago with the superstar pink hat wearing guy that all the people went cuckoo bananas for, Mr. Karch Karai.
Karch Karai.
Oh my God, the king of the beach back then. And this is to date myself, right? And yeah, when we're off this, I got more stupid stories to share with you. But
Well,
the point being is by far the most incredible atmosphere, excitement. I mean, just the power, the precision, the speed, the strength, the agility, like what these people could do on sand. Oh my God, it's so exciting, right? So like,
it's a lot harder than people think. People,
oh,
these athletes like Karch and
yes.
others make it look so easy, but
Mm-hmm.
it's actually quite hard, once you get out there, which is why I think, again, going back to, I love the fact that anybody can play at any level, right? I mean, we may not all be superstars like Karch on the AVP or win gold medals like he did in the Olympics, but we can still go out there with our friends and family and have a really great experience trying to be,
Yeah.
to be that good, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what's interesting to me is you mentioned, being from Toronto, Toronto, and I should have mentioned Canada among those great countries that are coming up, in beach volleyball. Right now, the Canadian women are the reigning world champions of beach volleyball, and very heavily favored, to appear on the podium when and if we ever have, our Olympic Games.
Right.
Um, but Toronto, is a great example. Is that you think, okay, landlocked, how could they possibly be a major factor in beach volleyball? Well, beach volleyball was being played in Toronto long before, lots of other places, even in the United States, right? Lots of athletes have come from that area. Lots of opportunity has been, opened up in that area. And you mentioned, coming to Southern California, people like Karch. Well, there are people from Toronto, from Manhattan Beach, from Hermosa Beach, these hotbeds of beach volleyball that have now made successful transitions, like Karch Kirai. He's the head coach of the U.S. women's indoor national team. Led the team to win a bronze medal in Rio, and is leading the team now toward Tokyo. There are folks that have come from these cities,
Yeah.
that traditionally have been popular, beach volleyball cities, and they are now behind the scenes, like myself. I mean, I won't compare myself to them because they've done way more than I've done in our sport, but they are behind the scenes now, and seeing the sport from an entirely different perspective, which sometimes can change your opinion about certain things, or sometimes it reinforces, your belief structure that, okay, as an athlete, this is what I saw, and now I understand why, things are the way they are, and I'm going to do something to change that, or what. So those are really interesting, things to see in a sport. Especially, I work with a lot of athletes, in kind of an unofficial capacity. I typically get a couple phone calls a week about, hey, I'm curious about this, and just like working with student athletes, working with professional athletes, a lot of time the conversation shifts toward, what do I need to do? I've had this great career now in sport on the front line, the front side of it. On the back end, what do I need to do to put myself in a better position to continue having a career, but now in a different, in a different capacity?
Yeah. Well, here's yet another thing that you and I have in common, I don't think I've told you, is that late last year I was approached by a local group in San Diego, very large headhunter firm slash job placement firm, that has asked me to try and help write a book to help athletes transition into the workforce. And previous to this, the gentleman who I'm working with, a gentleman by the name of Phil Blair, who has written some incredible books on transitioning into the workforce. Actually, he wrote an incredible book that helped people in the military transfer out of the military into the workforce. So now he and I are working on something where we're trying to help athletes. And it's incredible what you talk about, because again, another similarity between us in trying to help people on and off the court. And this is why I'm so excited to talk to you, because it's great when you just get to meet good people. And a lot of the work you've done and that you're doing now, it starts from the inside. It starts from a passion for your sport, passion for sports, but it's also really, in my opinion, a passion for working with people and helping people. And you're sharing your passion. So, like, as the international technical delegate for Tokyo 2020/2021, you're taking this sport to another level now with Paralympics, which is great, right? So I know nothing about the world of para volley. So can you share with us how this sport is growing, and maybe even explain to people what your role is in making this the next thing?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I knew nothing about the world of Paralympic sport, only a few years ago. I knew what I liked to watch, and decades ago, a really special special man. His name was Mike Hewlett, who we lost, earlier this year. Um, Mike Hewlett was a gentleman who, himself was an adaptive disabled athlete. um, Started basically the whole, the entire Paralympic volleyball movement, in the United States, with the help of a lot of other like-minded, passionate individuals from around the world. And um, Mike was the first person to expose me to some type of volleyball other than indoor standing volleyball that we all knew and played, or beach volleyball. And I was fascinated immediately. Back then, this was in the 90s. And it had long been going on before that, but my first exposure was in the 90s, and it was as a sponsor, and I was fascinated by the adaptive part of sport, any sport, but in particular, sport that I had a lot of knowledge about. He exposed me to standing volleyball, where I saw people playing with prosthetics and still having limbs attached, and then opened up my eyes to sitting volleyball, which is right now the only discipline of disabled volleyball that is in the Paralympic Games, is sitting volleyball. That may change, eventually. But what was interesting about sitting volleyball to me is a couple things. It was the pace of the game was very quick. It was the kind of look and feel of the game was different from any other volleyball scene. The court is smaller, obviously the net is lower, and there are even different signals for referees and for different infractions, and there are lots of differences. But what was similar was, you see in an athlete's eye, like the passion they have for what they do, and the competitive nature of being in a us versus them type of environment. And I saw a lot of that, but I also saw an opportunity for not just disabled athletes, but athletes who wanted to get out there and share a little bit more about the challenges behind the scenes. I met a lot of veterans who play sitting volleyball. I've met a lot of people who were born able-bodied and through some accident or medical situation, ended up being classified as disabled, in their sport. A really terrific friend of mine, if I fast forward through my kind of fascination as a fan, of sitting volleyball, a very close, really tremendous friend of mine, his name is Barry Kusner from Australia. He became the president of World Paravolley, which is the international governing body of sitting volleyball, of all disabled volleyball, but in this case, for the Paralympics, sitting volleyball. And Barry was in charge of the 2000 Sydney Olympics and Paralympics. He has been, a person involved very, very deeply in volleyball of all levels. And although he comes from Australia, he has done a lot of work all over the world, and has created, some very passionate, channels where volunteers are able to step forward and help, move this game forward on their continent, in their country, in their city, in their town. So for me, I had the opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit about opportunity, had the really great opportunity through Barry to step into the world of sitting volleyball. And to be quite frank, I'm uncomfortable because I didn't know as much about the behind the scenes or the governance. And so the first thing I did was I did no events. I do work professionally in running sporting events, and Barry knew that. We've run events together, and so he created an opportunity for me to travel to work an event as a technical delegate, to learn about the competition, to learn behind the scenes, to meet other people who were in, my same situation, trying to bring new people into any organization. I think a lot of the attention at first has to be put on onboarding. You have to understand the organization that you're coming into before you can effectively try to help it, right? And so, and that's something I do a lot with any opportunity. It's a volunteer opportunity. It's fascinating because one thing I really love about having worked in sport is the people that you interact with, right? The relationship building part of it. And I have met some of the most friendly people through sitting volleyball, but I've also reconnected with a lot of people that I knew from international volleyball and beach volleyball who are also in the same position. They have an opportunity, or they've always had an opportunity, to help with World Para Volley. And I honestly have met some of the most fascinating people, and I really deeply appreciate, having been through lots of other um, onboarding processes in sport or in business. I really deeply appreciate the communication, that World Para Volley has, and also the fact that they, they are very quick to teach, but also to listen. Right? They know that there's a lot of people that want to be involved that don't know very much, about the sport at certain levels, and so there's always an opportunity to learn, which I think is one of the key points I would give advice to anybody, right? Students to professionals, is that you have to be teachable, and you have to continue learning no matter what. None of us knows everything that we need to know at this point. So that's how I came to be, and to be honest, it was quite a surprise to find out that I would have an opportunity to help at the Paralympic Games. I plan on going for many Olympics. I've worked in some capacity, whether it was as a supplier or or a sponsor or what. But the last few, Rio and London, have been the few that I've been able to just participate as a spectator, right? Pack my bags, buy my ticket, be able to cheer. When you work in sport, you have to, an international sport, a lot of my colleagues and a lot of my friends and the people that I rely on don't come from the United States, right? So I'm always very mindful of being neutral, right? But I'll tell you, I'm the craziest super fan when it comes to the United States volleyball teams, and there's been plenty of documentation about that. So it was nice to have a couple of games where I could actually just cheer for the home team. But honestly speaking, to me, it's the people that I know in the sport are my home team. If they come from all different countries, they obviously have a special affinity for the Americans, but also I've worked with a lot of people from a lot of other countries, and without their help, I would never have been able to do my job, right?
Well, Lori, one of the things that I love about you is you're so humble, and you're not going to tell people that you're the innovator of creating some of the largest, if not the largest, indoor volleyball tournaments that this country's known. You're the person that turned the Colorado Convention Center into a tournament, and this is innovation. This is why I'm sure people are like, bugs to light with you, because they're just attracted to your passion, your insight, and like every great athlete, that little element that is common amongst all of them is that sense of humbleness. And you just breeze across the topic of international technical delegate, but I'd like you to break down what that term is. For the lay person who might not know, I being one of them, explain what technical delegate is in paravolleyball.
Well, let me back up for a second. They talk about these big tournaments, in the Colorado Convention Center. I was lucky to be a part of a team, right? It never happens with one person. I came on board with the organization that runs that tournament at a time where I had been, talk about being on different sides, right? And that sort of segues to the delegate situation. But I came on board with a team, to a team that had been running this tournament for, it's been different people coming in and out of positions, but they'd been doing their thing for years. My small part of it, and I'll tell you, it was a very small part of it, was actually to look at it from the lens of somebody who was attending this tournament, as a coach, as a spectator, as a sponsor, right? And having that lens to help plug a few holes, and then I worked with a great group in Tampa, whose tournament became too large for the convention center, if you can imagine that, and they moved their tournament to Atlanta, to seek, bigger horizons. I worked for almost 30 years in a volunteer capacity to help my own region that I was a part of in USA Volleyball, which is Southern California, to put tournaments, not just put tournaments on, they've been running those for years, but to put tournaments in a different perspective, to put things in a different light, as far as making the experience that much more meaningful for the people attending, right? And a lot of that, I'll be quite frank, it wasn't anything I don't have a magic wand, it wasn't anything that I knew better than anyone else. What it was just listening to my own my own experience, but also listening to everybody else, whether it was my customers. I sold volleyballs for years, right? And I can tell you that is a tough thing to sell, right? But you have a lot of interesting conversations with people, whenever you sell anything in a sport or in an industry. And if you listen to those conversations, there's a lot of like really nuggets of wisdom, that can come from them. So in terms of, taking that mindset, I will never be the person who was the only person responsible, for that, because I like to work with the team, right? And I feel like that's when we're at our best, is when we're working together with the team. That's also sometimes when we're at our worst, if the team isn't gelling, or if something goes wrong. And so it's never one person's credit, and it's never one person's fault, right? And whenever anything in business, goes to the sideways. But for me, what I love, and that really touches on what I really love about this opportunity. So international technical delegate is a fancy word, really for, I'm a volunteer, right? But there is a gentleman, and his name is Jason Moore, and he is kind of the person who is, assigned by World Para Volley to work directly with the Tokyo Organizing Committee, and he's been at this for years, as you can imagine. And those of us who are stepping on board to help be part of the running of the tournament, my part is on what they call the jury. I've played different roles with World Para Volley, but in this capacity, it's, the jury is largely responsible for maintaining the competition, everything from overseeing the actual matches, between the different countries, um, certifying the teams when they arrive to make sure that everything that's been required of them all these years has been, the checklist has been checked, and they've got the proper uniforms. I mean, it can be something as simple as, do you have the proper classification of your athletes? Which is something that I never knew anything about. Classification is specific to the Paralympic, disciplines, and um, how it's achieved. Like, there's a whole team and a team behind that team and another team behind them, of medical professionals who, I got really lucky in being able to watch some of them work, at different tournaments. And I'm just fascinated, by the work that these classifiers do. So in looking ahead to Tokyo, this opportunity for me, I'm the only woman on the jury, which is, not uncommon in the world of sport. It's less common in para volley than I would have expected. There are quite a few women who have ascended, to really important positions of responsibility. It just so happens mathematically, I would be the only one in this case. It doesn't faze me at all. I'm used to being sometimes the only woman in the room, but to me, I don't look at somebody, in this world as according to their gender. I just look at, okay, this is what I do, this is what you do. How can I help you? How can you help me? And what can both of us do in our capacity to help the organization that brought us here? Like, what does Jason need from us? What does Barry need from us? What do all the people at World Para Volley need from us? It's an interesting time to get involved with parasport, in particular, and I found that with sitting volleyball, most certainly, because there are lots of developments being made in opportunities, right? Not just for the athletes, but also for organizers to create more opportunities for the athletes to play. And that was one of the things that I learned, when I first looked into, okay, I'm part of the sitting volleyball world now. Like, what do I need to know? What are some of the things that I need to be aware of? And one of them was that there are very few opportunities to compete, and some of the conditions that our athletes around the world had been competing in were pretty rudimentary. I mean, they were pretty basic, and you talk about, the NBA, we have to have, this many people, returning to sport means hundreds of people, to work one game. And, well, gosh, there may have been maybe 4 or 5 people, working one, para volley event, from start to finish. And then, of course, you rely a lot on your volunteers, as with any international sport. So the opportunity, for me, to be a little bit more active, I guess I would say, in the world of World Para Volley, also was perfect timing because of where these games will be held. Japan, I'm Japanese. I was born and raised in the United States, although some people still don't realize that Hawaii is the 50th state of the United States. They ask me all the time if I'm foreign, which is kind of scary. But Japan, especially Japan volleyball, has meant a lot in my career path professionally, but also personally. I have great respect for the Japanese in terms of their business, savvy, and also the Japanese Volleyball Federation have come to know a lot of the people both on the court and off the court, over the years. And so the opportunity to help Tokyo in this respect was, was something I just couldn't turn
No,
down. Just
phenomenal.
couldn't turn that down.
It's amazing because you shed so much light on things that most people don't even have a clue of. And whether it's a youth tournament or we're seeing something like what you're a part of now at the international level, the epitome of the mecca of sport, the Olympics. How many things need to get done just for one game to happen? you know the amount of things, like you said something there that people they probably wouldn't even quite realize the significance of, and that's checking uniforms. Like I feel like such an ant of an ant to an ant in terms of my youth sport experience compared to you. I can't tell you how many times I've come out of the locker room with my kids' teams that I'm involved with, and you look down the hallway, and the hallway looks down at you, and next thing you know, you're both wearing the same uniform, right? Like, I mean, you don't understand, right? Just that alone. But then when you go through things like the qualifying period, the registration period, making sure everyone is eligible to play, um, they're they're signed in, whatever it may be. So many little things that actually need to be put into place that are of huge significance before the game even starts.
Mhm.
And most people just wouldn't know that. They're used to walking in and watching, turning on, and there it is, not really knowing that there's hundreds of people at so many different levels that are busting their hump to make it happen. And the amount of volunteers that are needed to make something like this happen, oh my God. I had a friend who worked for one of the world's largest, I'm going to say this wrong. It's the company that provides the staffing and the food for all of the venues involved with the
Okay.
Olympics, whether it's even at a professional level and in any of the major stadiums that you would go into to watch baseball, hockey, football. They took those people and their know-how and they sent them to China and Beijing. And what he taught me, shared with me, it was just incredible to see how many people would give up their time for nothing, just to be a part of it, be a part of the Olympic experience. The average human being wouldn't even know. They wouldn't even. So I'm so happy you shed light on that. I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit because there's so much that you have to share with us. So you went to USC, go Trojans. Um, when you went to college, what were you planning to study? Was sports even on your radar? Doing what you're doing now, was this even something that was being cooked up here? I
Yeah,
don't know.
not at all. Not at all. In fact, I, like many young girls who played volleyball, thought, oh, I'm going to go to a school where possibly I would have an opportunity to play, right? And I had this really terrible injury the senior year of high school, which I'm not saying that's the only reason why, but that was the sort of death nail, as far as, yeah, you know what, it's not going to happen for you. And maybe it wouldn't have happened anyway. But let's proceed. Like I didn't have a way to pay for college, so I was going to have to pay for it myself or get a scholarship, and that's the situation a lot of people, are in. I had two opportunities. Yeah, I had two chances for what would have been the best possible package, right? A little bit of scholarship money, a little bit of financial aid, and a whole lot of student loan, right? and
Yes.
um, at at the time, I was focused largely on a journalism career, oddly enough, which is something that rarely comes up in my career path these days. Um, and having to make a choice, the two schools that I was choosing between both had dedicated journalism schools, which almost nobody has anymore, but they both had dedicated journalism schools. And I got some advice from somebody about make sure you make a choice, that is realistic, and also that you would have the best opportunity for career placement. Not just career advancement, but career placement. Like, got to get a job when college is done, right? Because look at all these bills you're going to have to pay, and also think about geographically, where you want to end up, because a lot of times people end up in the same city as they went to college, or a lot of times they don't, but think about, in the path that you're choosing professionally, where could be the best spot for you to land as far as being able to get a job and more opportunities and everything else. And at the last minute, I made a switch, and I thought I was going to go to the, and then I thought about it after getting this advice and thought, USC was a place that I wanted to go. They had an excellent dedicated journalism school. But then what caught my eye is they had a major um, in sports information, right? Basically sports media relations. And they were one of the few, that in the whole country that had a specific, dedicate not only a school of journalism, and the sports information major wasn't even in the school of journalism, and so it was its own standalone major in communications and liberal arts, and things are structured much differently now. And the year that I got that I arrived, I mean the day almost that I arrived on campus with all my crap in the back of my car, and and ready to go, and I had this opportunity to work with the women's volleyball team, which was like a godsend, and it was only because they had lost basically all their players from the year before. They had gone 2-32 the year before I got there, and I'm pretty sure they would have let anybody be a part of that program. So I got to be in practice. I got to do a lot of things and physically participate. But spending all your time rehabilitating from an injury when you're looking down the barrel of college loans and a scholarship to maintain and everything else, you just have to sort of pick and choose at that point. And so when I got on campus, had this great opportunity to work with the team, I was also thinking I was going to be a journalism and a sports information major, and the program for sports information got cut. It was turned into a minor, which was great, sports studies minor, which I was able to continue on that path. And what that did for me was it married my two passions at the time, employment wise, which was, okay, maybe I could be lucky enough to become a writer. And at the end, I was heading toward a public relations path. And on the flip side, it's like, wow, if this sports information thing turns out, I'd love to apply for a job in some big athletic department, and still be around sport in general, because it was something that I enjoyed. Um, Maybe perhaps the two biggest learning, kind of the lessons learned came from, one, volunteering with the women's team to learn. Basically, I was given a terrific opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity to see the behind the scenes, of how a team was managed. I was doing things from working with the incoming teams on their practice schedule, to letting them into the gym, ordering products. I mean, I was allowed to do a lot of things that, my God, a volunteer assistant or even a student would never be allowed to do, right? These days they have paid positions for those, those responsibilities. I learned a little bit about game management. I learned a lot about personnel management. I learned a lot about how an athletic department worked. But the second opportunity that I think probably is um, the more valuable in terms of career advancement was, I had to get some internship experience under my belt, and had the great fortune to have an opportunity to intern in the actual sports information office at the University of Southern California. And notwithstanding some of the recent, I'll support USC till the bitter end, but it doesn't mean that I won't scold them for some things that have been happening recently. But at the time that I entered, into that job, that internship opportunity, I mean, we're talking, it was the height of athletics, the success of USC athletics. And it gave me a really valuable kind of trial by fire, if you will. It was like I think my third week in the office, there was a situation, a media situation, and I just happened to be the only person at that moment, in the office answering the phone. And had I not been taught properly how to answer a phone and how to deflect and how to, not give out too much information, boy, I would have really blown it for that for that opportunity. So I 100% credit Tim Tessalone, who is the sports information director, who was the director that I worked for and is still the sports information director at USC. He really gave me not only a educational opportunity, but he was the person to find me my first paid job at the AVP tour. So
Wow.
talk about, I mean, it was important to have the education I built academically, but I think the education that I got, practically speaking, from USC Athletics is one of the most valuable things that I have carried through in every position, no matter what, no matter what I've done over the years. There was always something that I pulled from my experience at USC that that helped me, not drown, right, in my job, and helped me, keep my head afloat. So I really appreciate that opportunity from Tim, and yeah, I mean, it's incredible.
But there's something to be said too about being around such a robust program, right? Like for lack of better terms, I really don't see what the difference is between a USC and any kind of professional program on the planet, whether it's the Major League Baseball, NFL, NHL. It's top notch.
Mhm.
You've got top notch athletes, you've got top notch coaches, you're dealing with millions upon millions of dollars. And I mean, I can't even think of what their market reach is like, even compared to some of the other professional sports in the world. Like, you're with a beast. You're with a program that exposes you to so much stuff all at once that I gotta feel that there are times where you're a young intern, a young student, and it feels like you're catching a drink from a fire hose with the information that's coming at you, right? But
Right, right.
therein lies the gift of the program. Therein lies the gift of what you're getting with this onslaught of information and pressure.
Mhm.
It's incredible. Like just your ability to handle problems, like you mentioned a few seconds ago, people people and problems all together, but also to be able to do it in a professional manner, right? I mean, in any kind of decision that we have to make, one of the options is always to do nothing. And you can't do that when you're
Right,
representing
right.
a program like that. Doing nothing's not an option. It's funny. I have a dear friend of mine who, about 2 years ago, I love this guy like a brother, was just getting out of a small semi-intense program in this country called the Navy SEALs. And he was recruited to work for one of the huge sports um, companies that covers games, TV, radio, you name it. It's one of those mega ones. And I won't say the name because I don't want to have it come back to him, but it's like one of the ones. And during this whole recruiting process, this was a dream opportunity for him. He just sat there with his mouth wide open through it all. And I remember him calling me from his phone in the parking lot as he was in between one of the rounds of interviews with this company. And he said to me, I just don't know why I'm here. Like, I don't even know why they're talking to me. Like, yeah, I'm a sports guy. He played Division I sports. He was an outstanding athlete, and now an even more outstanding athlete, what he had been doing for the next 8 to 10 years of his life. But how does that translate to working for this humongous juggernaut of a sports company? And we were talking it through. We were going through, his interview process to get him ready for it. And I had said to him, you know what? Show them that personal side of you and ask them. Reverse the table for a second here and say, hey, listen, I got a question for you guys. I'm just so excited to be here. I'm so excited to have this opportunity, but I got to ask you guys, Why me? Right? And he's like, really, Jay? You think we should do that? Like, dude, totally. Because now you're bringing the conversation into a personal level and they're seeing you as a person, right? So he goes and he does this and he spins the table and he says, hey, guys, I got to ask you something. Why me? And their response to him was just incredible. It was simplistic, but it meant everything to him. And it took his interview to like the moon. And the conversation just kept going back and forth, and it was great. And what they said to him was, you have the ability to make decisions. You have the ability to trust your gut.
Mhm.
And in our world, one of the worst things that could happen to us, that has happened to us, is we get black screen, or like in radio, there's radio silence, right? It's like the nightmare of everything in those two industries. TV, it's the black screen, the doo, right? We're off air. And in radio, there's dead silence. There's nobody talking, nothing happening, right? He says, for us knowing you and what your career has been, not making a decision is not even an option for you. You're going to make a decision. You are a person who can see through the forest and say, we're doing this, make this happen. And maybe there will be a time that it's the incorrect decision, but
Mhm.
at least we will not end up with that of death, right? The black
Yeah.
screen, radio silence, right? And that alone just changed the whole conversation, and
Yeah.
hearing you share this information is so valuable for athletes, because I think so many athletes have no clue how all these skills that are inside of them, work ethic, time management,
Mhm.
the ability to get along with others, the ability to problem solve, make decisions, make a call, take a leadership role. They have no clue how valuable this is in the workforce. They don't even think that this is something you even should put down on a piece of paper or send it in an email.
Right.
And I think all those things are what people are looking for, but they just don't know. They just
Right.
don't know because they're athletes. I'm learning about your education. I'm learning about your internship. I'm learning about you getting fed information like you're standing in front of a fire hydrant as it's wide open. How does all of this transform and lead you to, say, being chairman of the board, USA Volleyball? How does
Yeah.
that take your career in such an incredible path now?
Well, it's interesting. So the years I spent 7 years on the board of USA Volleyball, and 5 of those years as chair. And as many times as I say this, people call me a liar, but I never actually set out to be the chair of USA Volleyball. It happened quite organically. When I was recruited to the board, I think there were probably a lot of eyes wide open, like, what, her? Because I think I
Mm,
had spent my whole career um, on sort of the outside looking in, right? As there is with any international sport, there's tension and conflict between all the different parties, and I just so happened to have been working with all the other parties and not with USA Volleyball in any official capacity. I worked for a company that wasn't their sponsor, didn't set out to have that be the case. I had worked with tournaments that, while partnered with USA Volleyball, were their own entities, and sometimes there were disagreements, and sometimes there were, there the I think the communication, would break down. But the easiest answer to that question is that throughout everything that I've done, I think the beginning and what now will be toward the end, of my career path, always included volunteerism, right? Like when you're asked to serve, if you can in a meaningful way, you do it, right? And I had some people reach out, one person in particular, reach out and say, we really need to make some changes and some governance, attention needs to be paid to governance, and we need new thinking. A lot of times people criticize national governing bodies like USA Volleyball because they think that only the same 5 people are operating everything. That's not always the case. Sometimes it is. That's not always the case, but every once in a while, a national governing body seeks to change the dynamic a little bit and change the type of people that are in their volunteer leadership. Um, or people naturally, it's natural attrition, right? They naturally retire out, or find other interests or anything else. So there's no single factor that that I can cite that led to it. It was kind of a confluence of events, and one of them is just that I'm very passionate about volunteerism, and this was a once in a lifetime opportunity to provide service, and also in a sport that I had been working in my entire life. I think that my lens of the industry was both a benefit and a hindrance, to the work that I did with USA Volleyball. And it's a volunteer position, like all board positions are volunteer positions. But I think that all the other board positions that I had held, and even chaired some boards up to this experience with USA Volleyball, it put me in a good position to understand what it means to be a volunteer leader in an organization like that, right? Yes, you're a volunteer, so you have to be very careful about your process, right? But also you have to treat it like it's a job, as far as your time commitment. And there was another gentleman on our board at the time that I was on. His name is Bill Barnum, and is really successful and businessman in Los Angeles area, who also is a Stanford alum, and has a ton of experience, not only leading their boards and board of trustees and such, but has a lot of experience in general, just a lifelong experience. And I remember him telling me when I became chair, and he was one of the people who was a real strong advocate, for that role. I remember him telling me, like, you really have to dedicate yourself to this position. It's going to be however long this lasts. And I went 2 terms, as chair. I came in kind of in the middle of someone's term, and then then had another term that ended just last year. But he gave me the best piece of advice, like, you're not going to see daylight for a while. You have to really dedicate yourself to this and go all in, because if you don't go all in, it could potentially eat you up.
Yeah.
And he was dead right. So I look at the opportunity with USA Volleyball again as a way to give back. Volleyball obviously being a massive part of my life, but I think the takeaway for me, and I've been asked this question quite a bit, in the months, almost a year now that I've been finished with that commitment. I think the takeaway for me was, um, it could have easily eaten me alive if I didn't have the lens of the industry that I have. Not everyone's going to agree with everything that you say or do. In fact, if they don't, you're probably doing something right. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
as the adage goes, right? But also, I had to get past mentally the wall of, how can this happen if we know that this is true, right? I mean, because not everybody's going to know everything and not everyone's going to see it the same way that you do. Right. So I think for any, I was asked just recently, like, what advice would you give, someone, it was for another sport, what advice would you give for someone coming into leadership and volunteerism and all that? And that was the advice I gave them. I said, try to learn as much as you can, especially if you're an outsider, like, and even if you are someone who's considered to be in the know in the sport, you don't know everything, right? I didn't know everything. So the first thing I had to do was get in there and get my hands dirty and figure out exactly what was going on. I would have done that with any organization, that I was a part of. I spent, I'd say along the way, like professionally, I got some great, every professional capacity that I've been in, I've taken something away. And sometimes it's from something I've done wrong that, I would need to fix for the next one. But I spent 16 years as a volunteer, and most of that on the board of an organization called Kids in Sport in Los Angeles. That particular organization shut down a couple years ago, but it was part of the LA 84 Foundation, built with the proceeds of, of the summer games in 84. A lot of people that I've run across from the LA 84 Foundation have become mentors, whether they realize it or not. In a lot of cases, they do realize. And the 16 years I spent on Kids in Sports, it came out of a conversation with a friend of mine named Keith Cruikshank, who was the executive director at the time, and Anita DeFrance from LA 84, and Rafe Johnson. Like, okay, we need people who can get in here and do the work, right? If you're, we need people, we have enough people who give money, and celebrities who give influence, or professional athletes who can help us. What we don't have are people who understand how organizations like this are supposed to work, and people who are willing to kind of get their hands dirty and do the work. And so I steal that phrase all the time, from when giving advice. Like, if you're not willing to put in the work, and if you can't identify clearly why you're putting in the work, like if it's a me, I've been on boards with people who, are just looking to pad their bottom line, or they're on the board because they want influence for their organization or their company, or, their business. And typically I don't stay on those boards very long, or I don't join them at all. Or I leave them behind, and, and move forward. Right. So, yeah, so volunteer, it comes down to volunteerism, and you have to take it as any volunteer opportunity that you take, whether it's, coaching your son or daughter's little league, or AYSO, or club volleyball, to volunteering to serve, at the soup kitchens. And I've done all of that, but every opportunity that you have to take it seriously, and you have to, I say treat it as a job, but that might not be the best description. You have to treat it with respect, because
Right.
your decision as a volunteer is going to have a lasting impact one way or another, with that constituent group, with that organization, legally, whatnot. So you have to really take it seriously. Right.
It's amazing what you're bringing up here, because what I really want to make clear to anyone who hears our pod, and hears the pearls that you're sharing with them. You're a person that was a collegiate hopeful in the sport of volleyball, meaning you played all your life and you're good as an athlete. You coached volleyball, which we haven't mentioned. You've run travel programs of volleyball. Just the organization and the fact that you still have your sanity after doing that is a miracle in its own right. But then you go on, and you're taking on more information as a collegiate person, working with probably one of the biggest universities in the country that deals with sport in USC. And next thing you know, you're now a technical delegate in the Olympics. And oh yeah, by the way, you spent like 5 years as the chairman of the board in USA Volleyball. And you're talking about the power of volunteering. You're talking about the power of volunteering. And it's amazing how many people I meet that don't even have an ounce of the background that you have in this sport in their own, as who look at volunteering as something that's someone else's thing
Mhm.
to do. I've gained so many years of experience as a coach, a program director, and blah, blah, blah. Why should I volunteer, right? Volunteering is for the young intern or the person who hasn't done it. I should never do it. I've done that. I've been there, done it kind of thing. But here you are talking about the power of that and how we should be looking at that, right?
Mhm.
To me, in our day and world, it's the same as the person who walks by the penny on the floor, right? My grandfather said, "Do you understand that the more sense you have, the smarter you'll be?" Right? Pick up that penny, right? Put 100 of those
Right.
together, and then you'll see the value of picking up a penny, right? Did it cost you anything to pick up that penny? Did it cost you anything to do something for free? Did it cost you to do something to help somebody else? And he used to have a saying in Italian that's been translated in so many different ways by some of the most powerful and significant people to come into my life. And that saying basically went like this: it's not too hard to be a good person.
Mhm.
It's not too hard to be a good teammate. It's not too hard to just be good to somebody. And it's really not too hard just to be a good guy, a good gal. It's not too hard. And here you are talking about the power of being just a good person and giving back, right? And one of the things which bothers me at times that I have to use as a key to convincing that person to give back a little bit is the power of networking alone. The power of networking alone. I mean, whether it's working at a soup kitchen or food bank, or just giving back at a tournament as a whatever check-in person, line out person, whatever it may be. You have no idea who could be standing beside you.
That's exactly right. That's
You have
exactly right.
no idea who could be standing beside you, right? And you know, it's kind of like we see these commercials every now and then about giving a little bit of kindness. You never know how much that comes back. You know, I'll tell you a stupid story that came back to me, and it's because of this stupid story that I'm even in the position I'm in today to speak to you. I got into trouble in my second year of college in that I didn't know how to choose courses properly. And I had the academic advisors come to me and the coaches come to me, and everyone's in a big huff, and they're like, we don't know what you're doing, but you're on the 12-year program here, and you're not going to be eligible to play. And that doesn't go too well for a team when they're talking about their goalie. So we need to make you eligible. And bottom line, I needed to get into this class that would make me eligible. And the class was a psychology class. It was the first psychology class I had ever taken. And sure enough, there was only one class that fit into the practice schedule that I could get to, and blah, blah, blah. I went to the class for about 4 weeks straight. And every time I got to the class, I ended up having to sit on the floor. Because by the time I schlepped it from practice, got all the way across campus, and I got to the class, every seat in the class was taken. On the fourth week, it was a movie day. And in the first 2 weeks, it went like this. The first week, they had a guest speaker because I got there late. Guest speaker. Second week was a movie. Third week was an experiment with a guest speaker. And the fourth week was another movie. So I don't even know what this professor looks like. I just know the name. And I'm thinking this class is great, right? What a great gig the professor has, because I mean, 4 weeks in a row, and this guy ain't doing nothing. So I get to the class, it's snowing really bad, and I find a spot. It's the last spot, last row. And I jump in the spot, and there was not very many students there because of the snow that was coming in that day. And there's a movie going on. All of a sudden, this person sits beside me, and the person looks at me and recognizes my jacket and says, "Oh, you finally got a spot." And I'm like, "Yeah." 4 weeks in a row, right? Who knew? And you know, all of a sudden starts asking me, "So, are you in the class? What's your story? You're always here. You always sit on the floor. Blah blah blah." Right? And I'm talking to her like, you know, this is my deal. I got to get the class. I'm right now, I think, fourth, fifth, sixth, who knows what on the list of people trying to get in this class. If I don't get in, I'm dead. And this is why. You know, I play on the hockey team, and I need this class, and blah 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 blah. And the person says, "Well, you know what you should do? You should go see the professor. Tomorrow she has office hours between 1 and so-and-so, 1 and 2, 1 and 3. Just knock on her door, but be ready. She's going to grill you. Be ready. You know, definitely she's going to hit you with a couple of things. And if you're not ready for her questions, you're done." She said, "But, you know, I will tell you this. She's a hockey fan. And, you know, if you could spice it up a little bit and maybe bring her tickets, you never know. Might go a long way, right?" I'm like, "Oh my God, you're amazing." Well, all of a sudden, by the time I collect my books and the lights go on, I turn around, the person's gone. Next day, I grab a few tickets from one of our media guys. I head on over for the office hours. I knock on the door. Someone says, "Come in." I go in, and the chair is turned backwards. Big black leather chair turned backwards. "How can I help you?" Right? And I said, I'm here to talk to Professor so-and-so. And well, what do you want? I said, "Well," and all of a sudden I just start stuttering. I can't find my words, and I'm groveling. I really need to get into the professor's class on Wednesdays at 3:30 at this time. And, "Well, why should that, you know, why should she let you in?" And I go, "Well," and I couldn't think of anything besides to say, "Well, I'm on the hockey team. And if she could let me in, I will give her tickets." Right? And I just really need to get in, and if I don't get in, my mom's gonna kill me. Right? And all of a sudden, the person just starts laughing. The chair spins around, and sure enough, it's the lady from yesterday. So I'm looking at her, and I'm like, "Oh my God, you're the professor." So the day before, I'd spent the whole time, you know, sharing my soul, being honest, being open, being genuine. And I had no idea I was talking to the professor of the class. right? This is what a schmuck loser I am. And but again, it goes back to the point of you never know who you're going to meet.
Right.
You never know who you're going to say hello to. You never know
Yeah.
who's going to come into your life and say, you know, here's a napkin, or thank you for passing me the fork. And for all you know, it's the president of something else that can help you help so many others. That's all.
Yeah, that's true. That's true in every aspect of life, right? You treat people well because it's the right thing to do, right? But you also never know when, you know, I've had people that so when I volunteer, I go all in, right? I don't tell anybody, you know, anything about myself other than what they need to know, right? Yes, I've passed that, you know, that certification or, you know, no, I don't know how to do this. So you need to show me. And there've been a couple times where I've worked alongside, um, you know, people who are just on the start of their career path, a lot of them students or, you know, or what, and the things that you hear, you know, or the way that they behave is oftentimes, you know, the first impression that you're going to be and the last impression that you'll be left with. Right? And I actually had an opportunity once where I was volunteering. It was a beach volleyball event. I was volunteering. There was a young woman who was not necessarily volunteering, but doing an internship with the organization that was running the tournament, you know, the event. And in her capacity, she was in charge of the volunteers. Go figure, right? I knew they were shorthanded, so I'm like, yeah, I'll volunteer too. And the language, the you know, everything from the body language to the actual language being used and the sort of just disrespect being shown to volunteers really stuck with me as far as this person was concerned. And I promise you, I'm not kidding. Within a couple of weeks, I received an unsolicited job kind of inquiry from this exact person looking to leave the organization that she was, you know, in and come work for me and my organization, you know, and the person connecting us was somebody I really had a lot of respect for. And so I called that person, you know, not with the intent of outing this young woman, but I called the person who recommended that she, you know, contact me. And I just said, you know, I got this letter, appreciate the heads up. But let me just, you know, if this was me, I'd want to know. And so I retold the story and she was mortified. You know,
Mm.
she said, oh my God, you know, okay, well, you don't even have to answer. I said, no, I'll answer her that we're not looking for anybody right now. I said, but, you know, if an opportunity arises that's appropriate, you may want to maybe not be specific about this situation, but you may want to reinforce with her that behavior, you know, we're always under a microscope in business, no matter what. You
Yeah.
never know, right? You just don't know. And I've had, you know, I volunteered a lot during my time with USA Volleyball. I volunteered a lot to work tournaments where I was, you know, observing or just groups that I had, you know, already been associated with, like some of these big tournaments that you're talking about. And I was at a tournament once in Las Vegas. I remember this so vividly. This was a tournament that I had, you know, been going to for decades, right? And knew a lot of how it was run and all that. So I happened to be sitting up at what they call the tournament desk, right? Championship desk, and had this parent um, approach me who was just, you know, belligerent and rude, and their team had showed up late for a match and he couldn't understand why that team was being penalized, and, you know, you can't possibly be doing this to me and my club, you know. Okay, well, sure, you know, like, but sorry sir, you know, you're going to have to address that question directly to the tournament, you know, director, and blah blah blah. She's not here right now, you know, but I can take your name and number or whatnot. And then came the, don't you know who I am?
Right.
And, you know, do you know who I am? And what's your name? I want your, you know, I want your position. So I told my name, said, you know, and what is your position? I said, no, I'm really just volunteering right now to give out information about the tournament, but that particular type of information, I can't provide you. I'm not the decision maker, you know, on that. Well, don't you know who I am? I'm on the board of USA Volleyball. And that was very interesting to me because I was on the board of USA Volleyball at that time and I didn't recognize this person at all. You know, and that happens a lot. People throw your name around, they'll throw someone else's name around, they'll throw their own name around. And you know, I just felt at that point, it was one of the few times I would have done this, but I let him have it. I said, well, that's funny because I'm on the board of USA Volleyball and I don't recognize you at all. And were you at the last meeting? You know,
Yeah.
and it was a very quick, you know, conversation. And then it was, I mean, you know, well, and so, you know, so that kind of behavior. And I tell that story every once in a while. I never identify the person. Well, I haven't identified the person to the student groups that I talk to. But when I tell that story, those two stories, there's a lot of heads that are shaking up and down, a lot of heads shaking side to side, like, wow. Some people thinking, oh, okay, I better not do that, ever again, as if it was an option before. But
Right.
more of the heads shaking side to side, going, wow, who does that? Like, who does that? Right. Well, you'd be surprised. The answer is quite a few people do that. So I think it's, the whole part about, like I always explain it to interns or people who've worked for me or people who are asking me for advice. And usually they're younger people, right? Just coming out of college. Like, act as if you have a hidden camera on you at all times, right?
Right.
And in some cases you will have a hidden camera on you, and sometimes, but act as if your every action, your every word, is going to be memorialized, because this is the day of social media, and it probably will, but also it's
Which
because it's the right thing to do. Don't do bad things, because they're always going to come back and get you in the end.
it's amazing, right? Because now you're going into another huge golden nugget for so many young people leaving college or and entering the workforce, and people who are in the workforce, they're looking to make a change and improve their present situation. I mean, the ability to hone in and understand that social media is so heavily being monitored nowadays. It's beyond a gift. It's beyond a heads up, or in case you didn't know, you know. Hey, Laura, I want to ask you this. I know you're involved with a program dear to your heart, City of Angel Sports. Can you share a little bit about this incredible organization that you're a part of, and segue into sharing us a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. So actually, it's Angel City Sports is a nonprofit organization that focuses largely on adaptive and disabled sport opportunity. So opportunity is a word that keeps coming up, right? I mean, I feel like, they are in the exact perfect space at the perfect time, because they created an opportunity for themselves based on a need, in the adaptive and disabled sports world. And then they're now creating opportunities for, for literally hundreds of athletes, and it's going to keep growing exponentially. So how I got involved, while I was still volunteering with USA Volleyball, and oftentimes when I get to the end of one volunteer opportunity, because right, there's term limited or whatnot, I try to look for what the next, opportunity may be. Sometimes it presents itself and I'm not looking for it. And sometimes I'm looking to be involved with something and it doesn't work out, all the time. In this case, when I was still with USA Volleyball and I was just kind of getting more involved with learning more about the Paralympic disciplines of volleyball, there was an opportunity to be a part of a sitting volleyball clinic on the campus of UCLA. And it was part of the UCLA adaptive sport program offerings, and this one was going to be sitting volleyball. It was being managed and organized and sponsored entirely by this group called Angel City Sports. And I had never heard of them before, and I thought, well, this is great. It was kind of a tough one for me to make, but for something, you talk about gut instinct. I was just coming off a plane from China, having been at a sitting volleyball tournament. I literally had to get from LAX to UCLA. And if you know anything about rush hour traffic in Los Angeles, that's not an easy feat. And I was sick. I wasn't feeling well, so there's that split second where you get off the plane and you're feeling like a dog just, barked in your ear the whole way, 17 hours or so. And you're like, I don't know if I, should I be around people? Should I not be around people? But I went anyway. And it was fascinating to me because while I had seen sitting volleyball before, there were very few opportunities that I had to see it broken down for people who had no idea what it was about. Right. And there was a guy named Elliot who's with the U.S. National teams, in both administrative, and he knows a lot about coaching the game and refereeing and such. And he was running the clinic. And I thought, gosh, the way he's breaking it down for these people, like all these people in this room who are not necessarily volleyball people, but are adaptive sport people. They're really, like just salivating to get this going. And luckily, the U.S. national teams for indoor volleyball train in Southern California. And so there were some indoor volleyball players available, but the sitting team trains elsewhere, and the beach teams were all on the road competing. And so they, luckily, USA Volleyball the staff was able to get some of the indoor volleyball players to come to the sitting volleyball experience. Some
Wow.
of them had seen it before, some of them had not, but they just jumped right in, right? And they were great. And then after the whole clinic was over, it was a great opportunity to have some of those athletes, the national team athletes, share a little bit, like give some testimony about, hey, how did I get involved in sport, and and everything else. Well, they all, and they're very great public speakers, right? They always are, but these four in particular that were there were really, really engaging public speakers. But none of them held a candle to this tiny little boy who got up after they were all done. His name is Ezra Freck. And Ezra got up and gave his story about how he was born, with birth defect and deformed, left arm and left leg. And he gave his whole story. And at which point I noticed, yeah, he's got a prosthetic. He has a blade, oh, okay, that's very interesting. Oh yeah, as he's telling his story, I'm noticing more about this young boy. But the way he presented himself, his family, his experience with sport, and the fact that, kind of hit home with everybody that as a little boy growing up, I think he was only maybe 8 at the time, as a little boy growing up without any other little boys or girls that looked like him, right, or had the same, what some people would call a disadvantage, he saw as an opportunity, right, saw as an advantage. I didn't know anything else. I didn't know that there wasn't, that you weren't supposed to not have a leg or not have an arm or a thumb or whatnot. But the way he articulated, the importance of creating opportunities for these disabled athletes, because it's not just about physical fitness, it's about mental health, it's about emotional health, right? And sometimes it does come down to just health in general. Like these folks, have a lot of other disabilities that they need to be very acutely aware of, and staying physically fit, especially right now during this time of, of isolation, right? And quarantine, if you will, they need to stay fit, not just to keep competing, but to stay alive, right?
Right.
So to hear Ezra, and then as it turns out, Ezra's family, his father Clayton, his mother Bahar, and he's got 2 younger brothers, they were the founders of Angel City Sports. And when I started asking around, like, and I remember just videotaping this young boy, and I was asking people to my left and right, like, what is this organization? This is a great, how do I get involved, with this organization? And it just so happened that Ezra's mom was one of the people, and I didn't realize she was Ezra's mom, was one of the people standing next to me, and you should meet my husband. I went to meet her husband, Clayton Freck, and stayed in touch with him, over the years. Right? This was right around the time of the 2016 Olympics and Paralympics. Stayed in touch with him for 2 reasons. One, I really was interested in knowing more about the organization, and 2, they had a real desire to add sitting volleyball to their curriculum for this fantastic event called the Angel City Games. Angel City Games is a multi-sport, disabled adaptive sport event that's held in Los Angeles every year. It's only about 6-7 years old. This year will be a virtual games, and obviously because of the the situation. But somebody who was more seasoned as a volunteer told me, yeah, when we first started, I went to one of their meetings about this year's games. I said, well, gosh, when we first started, there were probably 3 of us in the cafeteria at UCLA John Wooden Center talking about, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could, offer a couple of different sports and put together some games? And there were probably, he said, maybe 18 athletes that first year. Last year, there were almost 500 athletes that Angel City Sports pays their transportation, their flights to Los Angeles. Because there are so few, we touched on earlier, because there are so few opportunities for parasport events to take place, they're costly, they're, getting the participants from place to place can be challenging, the fact that Angel City Sports can create a professional controlled environment at the Angel City Games means that a lot of athletes in the parasport world have been able to use that competition to excel and advance their own qualification through the Olympic process. I've met some really interesting people that have piqued my interest, right, outside of my world of volleyball, right, my kind of sheltered, world of volleyball, or isolated world of volleyball. I've met a javelin thrower, a young woman who's diagnosed with epilepsy, was having a corrective procedure to address her epilepsy, and ended up stroking out, and is not allowed to. Her favorite sport was soccer, but she's really not allowed to play soccer anymore because she's unstable, with the other on her feet. But really, she's not. But in that case, she was identified through this program and found to have an interest in javelin throwing. Right. And we're going to see her. I mean, mark my words, we're going to see her in an upcoming Olympics at some point, or Paralympics competition. She's engaging. She learns how to tell her story. I've met another gentleman who in his early 20s, very early 20s, who showed me and taught me a little bit about seated javelin. And the day that I met him, he actually threw a personal record. It was on his way to a qualifying event, to the World Athletics, qualifying event. I think that year was I think it was Dubai or Abu Dhabi. It was, he was heading to this event, and has since qualified for the Paralympics. But I'm looking at this contraption that he's sitting on, thinking, how do you get that on an airplane? And how do you, it's this huge, seated, countermeasured, counterweighted device. And then to hear his story, he was inadvertently caught in a drive-by shooting, paralyzed, from the waist down. Was a very physically fit, extremely talented, and very successful athlete who was heading to college, hopefully on a football scholarship. And then this all happened, right? And to hear his process about going from the athlete in a physical process, right? I mean, you have the mobility of your legs and now you don't. But it was more interesting, that's fascinating enough, but it was more interesting to me to hear like what he went through mentally, right? Just to try to keep it together, right? I mean, much less, the average person, you think about, you've got to keep it together, that you can't walk, you have to learn how to walk. Okay, no, you can't learn how to walk again. You're totally paralyzed. You'll never walk again. And hearing that jarring piece of information, but then to have been as elite an athlete as he was in his sport, to now switching gears to something totally different, just for the physical activity. And now he's as elite an elite athlete as you can have, competing in that seated javelin. And look, who knows what he's going to do right next year in Tokyo. I mean, the sky's the limit for this young guy. He trains, he competes, it's everything that any athlete goes through, except he's also having to deal with the fact that he's not going to walk again. Right? That sometimes is the crushing blow, to anybody's psyche. But in his case, he's made that an opportunity for himself. So through Angel City Sports, I had this really great opportunity. A couple of years ago, they asked, hey, are you interested in getting more involved, like maybe on our board? And at the time, yeah, absolutely was. But I was still involved in some other things, and I had not yet finished my term at USA Volleyball. So as soon as my term finished, I got the invitation again. I was invited to join their board. Incredibly proud of the work that such a small board, does. I mean, it's only about 7 people, right? Maybe 9 maximum it could ever be. But these folks are parents of, some of them are parents of disabled athletes, some of them are not. They come from all walks of life. They're all incredibly passionate about volunteerism, and they're all very serious people. And the thing I love most about this organization is its founder, Clayton Freck, and his son and his wife and his whole family. Like, they have no fear. They don't back down from anything. Nothing to them is impossible, because look, I mean, they've already gone through impossible, right? Their son is going to be the youngest Paralympian on the U.S. Paralympic athletics team, high jumper, incredibly amazing, long jumper and high jumper. It does all sorts of sports and activities. And in some cases, there are people who don't even realize, when they first meet him, that he is a disabled athlete, because he doesn't in his mind, put that out front. He's like, I'm an athlete first and foremost. Yes, these are the disciplines that I happen to participate in, but these people have no fear, right? They are incredibly, forthcoming and outgoing. They tell their story to help other parents. The thing I loved, when I talked to people about them and tried to get as much information as I could before I made the decision, to get more involved, there was a common thread among all the people that I spoke to. Some of them were parents, some of them were athletes in the program, some of them were administrators who had worked, with Angel City Sports before, and sponsors, right? And they all said the same thing. Like, Clayton Freck is how did I meet him? Well, he's he has no fear. He saw me on a street corner with my son, who's who's disabled, and just got out of his car and came over to talk to me and asked me, "Hey, does your son have a place to play basketball? Does your son like to play baseball? Do you like basketball? Do you like tennis? Do you have a place where you can take him to play with other kids his age? Oh no, well, hey, listen, here's my card. Call me." And a lot of those conversations, they already had programs running, but a lot of those conversations that he and his wife have had over the last few years have resulted in them digging into their own pocket and developing a program for that sport. I mean, new sports, wheelchair tennis, swimming, adaptive swimming, sitting volleyball, right? We have a discussion about sitting volleyball. All of a sudden there's opportunity for program development. So for me, it's, this is exactly the type of organization that I like to get involved with. It's something new for me. Most all the other opportunities that I've had to serve in any board capacity has usually been with an organization I either had worked with before, knew something about, or in the capacity that my professional life, lent itself to knowing something about. In this case, I am completely behind the ball on parasport, but I'm getting there, right? I'm trying to, in fact, I'm doing all these, while we're all locked in and stay at home, I'm certifying in certain areas and trying to get on as many, conference calls and video calls as what my work with World Paravolley, because I love that organization so much. It was the perfect way to segue, into something in the States. And so now I'm hoping to connect more Angel City sports with World Paravolley, especially with the 28 Olympics coming to Los Angeles. That's a big deal. Parasport in general in volleyball, we've added standing beach paravolley, which is 3-on-3. And we're hoping, crossing our fingers, that that's a discipline that can get into the LA curriculum. But to be able to work with a group like Angel City Sports, to be able to be a part of what is already, it's the second largest multi-sport disabled event in the Angel City Games, right? Poised to become the largest, with the largest offering of multi-sport opportunities. Like that's a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? And yeah, I've been impressed with how they've pivoted during this, this coronavirus period. They've pivoted quite well from physical activities to virtual activities. They do more than just sport programming. They provide assistance with health and welfare. They provide coaching expertise. They provide all different types, everything from the health evaluations and financial planning, and they have a lot of support from U.S. Paralympians, which is great, and Paralympians from around the world, who come to the Angel City Games to participate. So this, for me, is the next step, the next stage. Not necessarily leaving, the volleyball behind, but I think it was time. With having been on every side of it now, I think it was time to find something that I could then take all that knowledge that I had gained from my mistakes and successes, and now pour that into another area that's kind of passionate for me personally.
You're incredible. You're absolutely incredible. I feel so lazy compared to you. You're incredible. You truly are 100% taking it all the way around the world, with your experiences. I think, some people are lucky enough to have fallen into great scenarios, meet good people. So few people get to do it all. And you're like that albino tiger that's fallen into a great world because of your passions and all of your experiences that you're going to be able to now pass the baton and help even more people in something that you love, right? So, I mean, I've got all these cliche sayings in my head, find something that you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. I feel that's you. Being able to pay it forward, I feel that's you. All these things combined, it's incredible. Like, usually around this point, I'd be asking people we talk to, tell us about how you get your head set and tell us about the mental side. But you've been sharing that the whole way. You've been sharing that the whole way. And I will tell you this now, as we wrap this up, Headset Sports is going to get involved with your program that you're a part of, Angel City Sports, in some way, shape, or form. I don't know how, but I can tell you we will be involved because this is a program that we definitely want to help and be a part of. And you surprise me, like all of our conversations. You surprise me with a nugget of, oh yeah, by the way, did I tell you this, Jay? And you've done it again. And I can't thank you enough. And anything that you'll need of us, need of me, in the words of the famous Jerry Maguire movie, you had me at hello. And
I really appreciate that.
I can't thank you enough for today. I can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing. I can't thank you enough for just returning my email and coming into my life. And I'll tell you something um, that my best friend said to me the first day we met. He said, the worst thing you could have ever done is told me your phone number and where you live, because now I have both. So you don't know. You're toast. Um, Again, Lori, thank you so much. Thank you. And I just know I'm going to talk to you 100 more times by the end of this week. So thank you for being on our pod today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I'm really honored. Thanks.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.